Processes and tools dominate today's Agile discussions, but we are devoted to the individuals and interactions that make it work. From the beginner to the veteran practitioner, we have something for you. Welcome to Agile for Humans.
Welcome to this week's episode of Agile for Humans. I'm your host, Ryan Ripley. This is the podcast about bringing forward the individuals and interactions that make Agile work. Joining me this week to help that endeavor, author, speaker, and probably the creator of one of my favorite books, Geoff Watts. Geoff, how are you? Hey, I'm doing great. Really excited that you decided to do the show and really appreciative because I think as I mentioned prior to getting started here, Scrum Mastery is my go-to book. So this is, I believe, the single best book written on what it is to be a Scrum Master, not from a process perspective by any means, but really what it means to internalize the role of the Scrum Master, the habits, the behaviors, the thinking. I think you've captured it beautifully, and just, it is my go-to book. So really excited to have you on and really appreciate you doing the podcast.
Oh, thank you. It wasn't really so much of a decision for me. It was a no-brainer. And obviously, the kind words you just said about my book there, I return in about your podcast as well. It's focused on humans. It's focused on the people side of things, and I guess it's one of the reasons why we have similar views on things.
Definitely. So really, again, thanks for being here. And interestingly enough, you have a new book out, and it's one that I think you revolutionized thinking behind Scrum Masters and through Scrum Mastery. And now you've brought forward you've brought product owners to the spotlight. So Product Mastery is now out. And I always ask authors, mainly because I'm just curious about it, what did you see out there in the marketplace? What did you see out there with current product owners where you felt the need to bring forward this wonderful book?
It's a good question. I think for me, at least, so I split my time in a number of different ways. So I train, I coach teams, and I coach individuals. And one of the things that I find from a product owner perspective is that there's quite a lot of information out there about techniques that they can use to help, for example, prioritization. Okay, so prioritization is a big part of a product owner's job. It's a very difficult thing, and you can apply a technique. There are plenty of techniques out there: Moscow, stat ranking, anything like that, Kano analysis, which is all great, and you can apply that and it might help. But the product owners that tend to be the most successful are the ones that actually can understand what's making the prioritization difficult for them and their organizations. And if they can tackle that, then the technique is secondary. So this is the sort of people side, the human side, if you like, to the product owner role, which is often seen as very much a strategic, organizational, practical, technique-driven role. But it's still people, right? And they still have to work with people and get the best out of themselves to get the best out of others.
So what are the things that you're seeing that actually make the prioritization difficult? And I'm assuming it's some kind of system at work, some kind of politic, or is that not where we're going with that?
Well, I think there are a lot of factors, and that could stem organizationally. It could be a strategic thing. In fact, as an organization, we don't really know what we stand for. It may well be that we haven't got joined up thinking and competing products. We aren't clear about who we're building this product for example. But also, it could come down to sort of personality traits as well. So the desire to be perfect, the desire to please other people, the difficulty in saying no to others. All of those factors can play into making prioritization exceptionally difficult, because you've got so many options in front of you and you're trying to do everything at once or please everybody at once.
So it sounds like to me, and this is how I've always viewed the product owner role, it's really the mastery of alignment. And what I mean by that is you're taking a customer input, or a customer need, and trying to align an entire organization around it. Does that resonate? Does that make sense?
Well, it certainly resonates to me. Alignment is a big part of the product owner job, helping other people understand what that alignment is as well, and being quite ruthless in the pursuit of that, really, because there are so many avenues that we can go down when building a product. When you use the phrase there, identifying a customer need, And quite often it's very difficult to identify one customer need. You've usually got multiple customers and they've got multiple needs. And everything's important. Drilling down and being quite ruthless and focusing on the next important slice is a big characteristic, a big pattern, if you like, in the best product owners that I've seen.
So this job is massive, the job of the product owner. I've seen it described in many different ways. A good friend of the show, Bob Galen, likes to say that it's part product owner, part project manager, part leadership, part business analyst. With such a massive role, how could a product owner possibly do it alone?
They don't. Is the honest answer to that. I mean, I will say that there's an element of guilt in what I've written here, because actually what I've written about actually expands the role even more. So it's a big enough role anyway. But I talk about how the best product owners, they don't just do all the difficult stuff that you've just mentioned there, but they will also involve themselves in collaboration. They will all involve themselves in listening, understanding, in decision making, stakeholder management, lots of other things that go along with that in order to be successful. And what was already a difficult and demanding, time-consuming job, and there's a part of me that thinks I might have made that even bigger in my definition. However, I can temper my guilt because I believe that looking at the best product owners that I see, they have a wider remit, but they manage it better. So they don't try and do everything. They don't try and do everything at once. They don't try and do everything on their own. They're assertive enough to provide leadership and direction, but they're also humble enough to accept that they don't know everything, that they shouldn't be expected to know everything. And that actually, by asking for help, not only shows and demonstrates the kind of behaviors that we're looking elsewhere, but it increases engagement and increases the knowledge that we're bringing into the product development process from all those people around the organization and outside the organization who have something valuable to contribute.
So you've expanded the role, which I think was actually well done in the book, but you've also created this safety, which I think is important, because it is, when a product owner, the name I think is a difficult one. The product owner would infer that this is the person that should know all, and there's perhaps some guilt on the product owner side for asking for that help. What I really like is how you've created some kind of safety around the idea that this job is bigger than one person. I mean, they can't do it alone. Is that fair? I mean, it simply cannot be done well alone. Can we be that direct about it?
I think so. I mean, I refer to an essay written by Leonard Reed, who talks about the simplicity of the pencil, and how something as simple as that, something as everyday an object as that we all know and we all think of as rudimentary. Actually, there isn't a person on the earth that knows everything about making one. Being able to source the wood and treat the wood and be able to cut the wood to the precision that's needed, to be able to source the graphite that goes in between, to be able to create the paint required for the outsides, create the little metal bit on the end that holds the rubber, and to be able to create the eraser that goes in that. That's something as simple as that requires knowledge from multiple different parties. And so a big part of what I've tried to get across in the book is the normalization for people, the acceptance that, do you know what? This is a complex world that we are in. It's a complex world that requires acceptance of change, of uncertainty, and actually the best products come from collaboration and a healthy dose of trial and error.
A large portion of the listeners out there are in a Agile coach, Scrum Master, that type of role. And given how large a role the product owner, what they've taken on, how can people in a Scrum Master or an Agile coaching role support the activities of a product owner? What's the best ways that we can help them be as effective as possible and help them keep their sanity?
I like that phrase, keep their sanity. For me, I think the biggest thing that I've noticed, I haven't yet found a product owner who is trying deliberately to be an arse. or to sabotage. They're all doing the best that they can in the information, with the information they have, in the environment they find themselves in, and the knowledge that they have. And so the best thing that I find that will support product owners is, firstly, just accepting that these people are trying to do a good job, that they are probably overwhelmed, and meeting them where they are. And I say that because it's quite easy to assume that, malicious intent is probably too strong a word, but carelessness or just taking charge and the feeling of pressure, I guess, coming from a product owner when you're in a development team environment or a Scrum Master team environment. Very easy to blame the woes of the product development effort on the product owner. But actually understanding where they're coming from, asking where they might need some support, helping the product owner understand that, they're human and this is difficult and no decision can be perfect, will help them free up their time to prioritize it more effectively.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Geoff is going to walk us through the Driven Acronym and what that means for product owners. Looking for a conference that gives you customized learning options to explore Agile and beyond? Attend Agile Dev West, the premier Agile event, June 4th through the 9th in Las Vegas, Nevada, covering the latest techniques and topics no matter your level of Agile adoption. Learn both foundational knowledge and new methodologies to develop skills, supercharge knowledge, and re-energize your career growth. Take deep dives into topics such as implementation, testing, leadership, Scrum, enterprise, requirements, techniques, and more. As an added bonus, the event is co-located with Better Software and DevOps West conferences. Your one registration automatically gives you access to all three programs. This means you can choose from over 100 learning and networking opportunities to build a customized week of learning that fits you and your organization's specific needs. Explore the program at well.tc/AgileDev. Agile for Humans listeners use the code AgileDev to receive $200 off their conference registration fee. Register by April 7th. Super early bird deadline for a combined savings of up to $600 off at well.tc/AgileDev. So something that you did in the Scrum Mastery book, which I really liked, was the use of an acronym to reinforce the learnings. And so for Scrum Mastery, it was retrained, which was, I think, important because most Scrum Masters, and including myself, when I read the book, needed to be retrained in the way that I approach the work. In Product Mastery, you use Driven. Can you walk through the Driven acronym? And first of all, Driven is an interesting word to apply to a product owner. So I'm hoping you would shed some light on that. But then walking through each of the pieces, just like, I don't want you to recreate the book in 5 minutes,
sure.
But walking through the acronym, I think, could be useful to people.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I was interested in how people will respond to the acronym of Driven, but personally, it's something that I see in the best product owners. They do have a passion. They have a passion for the product that they're building and the organization that they're part of. They want it to be successful, and they kind of it's a tough gig. And developing a product, there will be bumps along the way. So you have to have a certain amount of drive and resilience to see this thing through. It's not all going to be plain sailing, especially in an agile environment. So that's what sort of underpins it, if you like. As well as that, being driven to work on your own strengths and your own characteristics. So then each of the letters in Driven represents a different characteristic that obviously I focused a little bit more on in more detail. The first one's decisive. I think it was quite good for me. I didn't have to do a lot of manipulating of words or letters or acronyms to get decisive first. But decisive is a huge part of the product owner role, constantly having to make decisions, even if those decisions are to decide to delay. Because actually putting something off can be the right thing to do, and that's a decision in itself. And there's a lot underpinning that psychologically behind the ability to be decisive with incomplete information. Once the second letter there is ruthless, which raises a few eyebrows when you first mention it. And it's the first point that I want to make is that product owners, when I say ruthless, I'm not talking about them being cruel or brutal, but ruthlessly working out where value comes from, what is valuable for the product, what do people actually want, what do they actually need, and then ruthlessly following that for the good of the product, for the good of the organization. And it's easier said than done, but it's an important part of it. Then we're on to informed. So being knowledgeable about the environment that we're working in, the market, whether it's an internal market or an external market, the user needs, what's going on, what problems are that we're looking to solve, what other options there are available as well. So looking at the product space that we're operating within, but also being informed about the people that we're working with, the stakeholders, what drives them, where their mutual areas of interest are, so we can get consensus, and being informed about the development team as well that we're working with, that we're collaborating with, so that we can build rapport, we can understand where things are going, they feel connected and they can talk to us and we can work things through. And then we're on to versatile. And this is, as with all of these, there's an element of balance in there. And the good product owners that I'm aware of, they kind of realize what a valuable service they can provide to a team to help them cope with uncertainty. So agile teams, agile products are almost by definition operating in an environment of high uncertainty, high change. And uncertainty and change naturally lead to anxiety within human beings. We sort of crave certainty. And so, an agile environment, we're being quite explicit. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the requirements are. You don't know what feedback you're going to get at the end of the sprint. We don't know if this is actually going to be a successful product or not yet, but we're going to give it a go. And the product owner, by providing some level of predictability in their leadership style, in their behavior, can ease a lot of that anxiety. The team don't have to second guess or worry about how the product owner is going to react or respond to some new piece of information. They can put all their energy into the work, which is great. But equally, things change and circumstances require a different approach. So the best product owners are still able to flex their leadership style to meet the needs of that particular moment in time, whether that's being quite explicit about whether something is right or wrong, or whether it is going to be deployed or isn't going to be deployed, or whether we need to set aside immediate performance goals for investing in the growing the team bonds. But we're on to empowering. We're nearly there. Stay with me.
No, this is great. You're doing well.
Empowering, which for most people who are familiar with an agile environment, all your listeners will be, won't come as much of a surprise really, because the best product owners, they don't come along and lead through power. Obviously, in a really simplistic Scrum environment, the product owner does have authority. They do have power. And that can be useful when being decisive and being ruthless, but the best product owners, they don't lead through micromanagement or authority. They lead from within, and they empower those around them who have the subject matter expertise, all those stakeholders who have those different perspectives, the development teams who have the product or the technical expertise. They bring them in and they harness that by giving people autonomy to help solve business problems rather than implement solutions.
Does this also refer back to the idea of a single product owner making decisions? And maybe I'm not phrasing this right. So empowerment, can that also, when I think back to the Scrum Guide, that there is one person who's making the decisions, that this is one empowered person who can make the call instead of product ownership by committee? I mean, is that also part of your thinking there?
Yeah, and I mean that's also a nice little link to the final aspect of negotiable, because the best product owners, they will as part of empowering, they will involve stakeholders and give them the opportunity to have a say and to feel comfortable in putting their opinions forward and argue their case quite passionately for why this item should be higher on the product backlog, or we should go down this particular direction with regards to the design, or whatever it is. So they will negotiate and actually facilitate negotiations amongst the stakeholders, but that doesn't mean that they let go of all their responsibility. They still have the responsibility to make the decision. I really wanted to bring in one particular quote, and it was going to be a little bit. It was going to be more prominent in the book than it actually turned out to be, but I still managed to sneak it in there, which was the Atticus Ignonis quote about a camel is a horse designed by committee. The idea that if you try and take everybody's opinions into account, you end up with something that nobody really wants, nobody really loves. And so these things, they play into each other. There's a ruthless streak into that, but equally not using that authority that you do have to either consciously or unconsciously shut out any voices that could add value.
Well, and I think back to the Agile Manifesto when I think about these types of theories. When people bring forward, all of these new ideas about product ownership, Scrum Masters, and Ruthless is the one that I really zeroed in on, and I think you're right. That one raises eyebrows, but I think it's essential. And the link I'm probably stretching a bit, but when I think back to the manifesto about simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. In order to actually do that, right? So in order to actually have a backlog that is as simple as possible, that is not filled with work that shouldn't be done, the product owner absolutely has to be ruthless. Right? And it is one of those traits that actually will reinforce, if you can get that one right. And as I've been going through the book and thinking about, the various traits and where I've seen product ownership kind of fall on its face, it seems like that ruthlessness is the one that helps us actually keep a lot of our values together. And although it's the one that raises the eyebrows, I keep coming back to it thinking this is the one that if you can have that, we could almost train or teach or coach the rest.
No, I like the way that you link that back to simplicity. And that principle in the Agile Manifesto actually raises quite a lot of eyebrows in my experience as well. I think partly because of the language, but the idea of, and it's quite difficult for human beings to keep things simple. It's almost an insult to our intelligence to do the simplest thing that will possibly work. And it is absolutely, it's very easy to then build something that isn't needed, which makes it harder to maintain and it makes it more costly and takes longer, and then harder to build on top of as well, which is, the inherent part of an iterative incremental approach.
Well, the other part of the manifesto that shines forward as I think through a number of the points you're making is that our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. That's all on the product owner, except for the delivery part. And so what we're basically saying is we want to satisfy the customer, which means the product owner has to be in alignment with the customer in order to know how to satisfy them, right? Early and continuous delivery means that the product owner has to know at a granular and at a sliced level what needs to be delivered. So it can't be this big epic. It has to be small batches, small stories. And finally, they have to be valuable. And so one of the biggest... So that is our first value, right? Or that is our first principle behind the Agile Manifesto. It is the most important because it says our highest priority is this. And I think 3 out of the 4 things that it says falls directly on the product owner's shoulders.
Yeah.
Such a massive responsibility. And so for the product owners out there, I think first of all, this book will create empathy for your role. Now, so Geoff has increased your role. So I think he did that admittedly, but it also provides a framework for you to think about the work you're doing. It provides the permission to ask for help. It creates the safety to ask for that help, or at least creates the awareness that you need help. And for all those reasons, really enjoy this book. And I think it'll help any product owner out there who's perhaps struggling in their role or who is thinking that there should be some other ways to take their work to the next level. So, Geoff, really love this one, and thank you for walking through it.
No, thank you.
So, a book that you also wrote that I wanted to tie back to real quick, so the Coach's Casebook. So This is one that I think was more geared towards the Agile coaches, the Scrum Masters out there. But as I think back through and I look back through some of the topics, I think product owners could get a lot out of this as well. And I think they actually have, as we were talking about some of this prior to getting started. Something that your second case of people pleasing, I think, is important, or as an anti-pattern that product owners could definitely work on, or at least become aware about. But imposter syndrome. Yeah. So when you take a role like the product owner, which is bigger now thanks to you, and difficult and absolutely critical, as we tie back to the manifesto, we see that, such a responsibility is placed on them to meet many of those expectations. I think imposter syndrome sets in very quickly. Now, have you seen that in your practice, and how have you helped product owners, if you have seen this, get through some of those tendencies?
Absolutely. I thank you for making the link. There are a number of key traits that are. So the Coach's Casebook mentioned nothing about Scrum, nothing about Agile. It's just purely about people, really, and a lot of the common traits that we have that can be valuable, but also can limit us. And so, imposter syndrome is incredibly common, and just very briefly gives people that are struggling with imposter syndrome that they feel a little bit like a fraud in many ways, that they're not qualified to be where they are, and they've got to where they are because of a lot of luck rather than actually giving themselves credit for their own achievement. And when they walk into a room, their default response is to think that other people in the room are more qualified and more intelligent than they are. So it's almost like a self-doubt in a way. And this is a big challenge for product owners. If they need to be decisive with incomplete information, that self-doubt can be exacerbated. Do they have the confidence to be ruthless? Do they have the confidence to be able to make those decisions? And so your initial question was what have I seen that has helped them do that? And one of the things that might sound really sort of oversimple, if you like, is just acknowledging the number of correct decisions that they have made, because we often don't acknowledge the good decisions that we make. We generally only focus on the ones that haven't gone right. So first of all, just going to thinking about, even if it's just a case of, did I decide to take the right route to work today? That kind of thing. That's a decision that you made, and it's good. And thinking of all the things that just go unnoticed that prove how good a decision maker you are. And the second thing is that normalization of the fact that it's almost impossible to make a perfect decision. And if you can internalize the fact that no decision is perfect or possible to be perfect, it makes it a little bit easier to make an imperfect decision.
Certainly. It also reminds me of just one other case from the book that I really like. It's let me make sure I say this correctly. It's Ostrich Syndrome. And so really Dunning-Kruger sets in, and I've seen where that happens a lot. I think it happens a lot on the Agile coaches. You see a perceived competency, but it's not, but you don't know what you don't know. I think on the product owner, there's definitely some vulnerability to that, simply because of the wide range of skills, information, and then operating in the presence of uncertainty. Is there anything there that you've seen where perhaps Dunning-Kruger has held a product owner back and they've perhaps needed some readjustments or alignment there?
Yeah, in fact, I was just talking to somebody, was it Monday night? I did a local meetup group. So Dunning-Kruger is kind of the opposite of imposter syndrome, where you think you're pretty good when you're not, and you kind of ignore all the feedback to the contrary about your competence. What I found interesting, and also can be quite helpful for people, is what many studies have found, that the more you feel like an imposter, generally the more successful you are. So the more successful you are, the more you doubt yourself, because the more you're aware of what you don't know. Okay. However, if you think you're doing really, really well and you don't really doubt yourself very much, there's a high chance that you're suffering from Dunning-Kruger. And is there anything that we can do about this? Well, the difficulty is with the product owner role. And so the guy that I was speaking to had just lost his job. He'd been made redundant because the product development company that he was working for basically built a product, got it out to market eventually, and there was no demand for it. And the person who was driving it, the person who was the product owner in that environment, owned the company. So it was his money that he was ploughing into this. And so this idea of, well, you have, not only do you have the authority of the role, but you actually own the company as well. And he said, no, I've got this idea, I've got this vision, it's going to work, I know it's going to work. I don't need to go to market, I don't need to test my ideas with my users, I know it's going to work. Completely oblivious to inviting feedback. And it took too long, and by the time it got out to market, there was no demand for it, and he'd spent so much money that the company went bust. And the guy that was working there, he'd lost his job as a result of that. And he said, what could I do? You can tell the owner of the company only so much before he says, get out, you're not on board, you're not a team player, I don't want you on my team anymore. And you've lost your job anyway.
Yeah, certainly. It's just all of these. All right, so let me just say it like this. Read the coach's casebook. I think many people would find benefit. It is the human side of Agile. It's one of those, it's not Agile specific, but it's one of those things that these are 12 things that I certainly see a lot of myself in a few of these as well, where it's just blind spots that we all have. I mean, being humans, I think everyone could read through this and find a few of these spots that you can be susceptible to. So I don't think that's a negative thing. So definitely enjoyed a lot of these case studies. I think it applies very well back to product mastery, and a combination of these two books I think could help a lot of product owners kind of get out of their own minds, stop beating themselves up, and help them help empower them to make some of those decisions that they need to make with all that uncertainty floating around them.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that. For me, I'm kind of admitting that I'm making the job a little bit bigger, but I believe that by helping product owners understand themselves a little bit more, and all of those traits that we talk about, perfectionism, the desire to please people, impostor syndrome, even Dunning-Kruger to an extent, has benefits. Okay, they can help people, but they can also hinder people. So it's not that any of those traits are good or bad. It's about finding the right balance, and the way you can find a balance is by becoming aware of it. And the product owners that are more self-aware generally are more successful. They can find ways much easier of making the job that they do, that difficult, all-encompassing, potentially overwhelming job, a lot more manageable. So
you've created awareness for Scrum Masters and product owners through these books. I think you're bringing a lot of these practices forward. So what's next? So now that I think you're going to probably take a little bit of a break, because from every author I've talked to, they say once you write the book, you just want to go disappear for a few months and just let it go and let it be what it's going to be. But I have a feeling that given your body of work and some of the insights that you bring to the community, that you're not done yet. What's the next idea that's kind of taken a grip on your brain and that you're starting to work through?
I might regret what I'm about to say, but I'm very grateful to my family that whenever I say I'm going to write another book, they don't respond with, "Oh, really? But you promised you wouldn't." And yeah, I put a lot of myself into it, and it's a huge undertaking. But I mean, there is a kind of obvious next step that a couple of people have already pointed out. There are 3 roles in the Scrum team, and I've written about 2 of them. And the idea of teamwork is an important one. And I had a podcast about this a while ago so Paul Goddard and we create the Agile Pubcast. We have a podcast in a pub, an Agile chat over a pint, if you will. And we were talking a while ago about the 2 main fundamental premises behind teamwork is basically don't be an arse and assume positive intent. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, but because Agile projects are built around the premise of teams, of actually working together. That's, for a Scrum Master to be effective, for a Product Owner to be effective, those two roles can create the space for a self-organizing collaborative team, and then it's up to that team to step forward and enter that space and own it. So that, I spend a lot of my time with teams and helping Scrum Masters coach teams and helping Product Owners collaborate with teams. So if I was going to commit myself to something else, then I think that would possibly be the next obvious step.
So what does it look like for a team to actually step into that space? Because I think that idea, it's one that a lot of coaches struggle with, right? So we try to create this environment where there's safety. We want to make people awesome. A lot of the new modern agile kind of things. The product owner is collaborative. They have empathy for the team. They're doing all of the right things, but then the team doesn't step forward, or perhaps, and I think there's a few reasons there. Perhaps they don't know they need to step forward. I think awareness, which is what I think your books bring to the table, especially. So if you were to write a book, perhaps you could help teams become more aware of that responsibility. But I think it's either it's probably awareness, reluctance, or some kind of lack of safety. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Safety is huge. I generally have assumptions, and while not all of my assumptions will prove to be correct, there are some that are helpful, even if they're not correct, if that makes sense. And one of my assumptions that I believe to be helpful, even if it might not be true, is that everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody wants to be, if given the choice, everybody wants to be successful. And given the choice between being part of a meh team and a great team, most people would logically choose to be part of a great team rather than a meh team. But quite often those assumptions aren't explicitly tested within an organization. Those questions aren't asked. The question of, do you even want to be part of this team, often isn't asked. People are just often put together in a group and said, right, you're working together on this now. There's no or little to no investment in developing that team and helping them develop themselves and create their own identity. But without question, the best teams that I've come across all have an identity. They know who they are. They know what they stand for. They've got common values. They know what to expect of one another, and they've gone through that either consciously or over time. They've worked out what those expectations are through trial and error. And they've learnt, because it's easy to say you're in a safe environment and you're allowed to fail, but those words need to be backed up pretty quickly with some evidence for teams to genuinely believe it and put their neck on the line. But the third aspect that I'd throw in there is time. Because even the best teams take time to establish themselves.
Yeah, there are a few. If you're not catching what I'm doing to you, I'm trying to prime the pump for the next book. So let's keep you focused on this stuff. No, it's a huge undertaking, but I hope you end up doing it. But a few things there. The time thing is so critical. What I have found is that companies will bring in coaches for a transformation and expect in 3 to 6 months they're done, and not realizing that, I'm not sure what kind of timelines you've seen, but I've seen 3 to 5 years to really get teams solid and organizations solid, and keeping the practices reinforced and stable. Backsliding costs so much time, and just getting to the point to where flow and throughput and outcomes are really getting excellent, and the team is comfortable. Or I think we're talking years, not months. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think in general, I think you're absolutely right. I think there are a number of factors that can allow that time scale to be accelerated.
Sure.
So a greater sense of purpose, a greater sense of commonly accepted urgency rather than management mandated urgency. Really buying into the project will do that. A well-balanced team will do that a little bit quicker. And the ability to see results will help as well. There are a number of factors that will allow you to do that. And the best Scrum Masters out there and the best product owners out there, they realize the power that a really, really good team can give as opposed to just a collection of individuals, and will do whatever they can to help that group fulfill its collective potential rather than each individual's potential.
Yeah, it's the analogy of the golf team versus the basketball team. Right?
Yeah.
Golf team, everyone's score counts. Basketball team, it's just one. And I think there are a lot of golf teams out there as far as software development teams, and not a lot of basketball teams. But the other point, real quick, before I think we hit close to our time box, is that idea of voluntarism. And I think perhaps I'm going to do a show about this in the future, but maybe we can talk you into chewing on a few of these ideas as you get further along on your new book. But but the idea that how rare it is to actually ask people if they want to be a member of an Agile team, as opposed to just assignment, or people come in on a Monday and they see this new person with a different color badge on, and it's, oh, here's your Agile consultant, you're doing a transformation, congratulations, now let's get this done. Instead of asking, is this even a way that you want to work? And I think that's a fascinating topic for another time, but just the fact that you pointed out, it's not a community of voluntary association, is it?
No. And I find I have a huge amount of empathy, despite part of my job being to train people and to coach people and to facilitate an agile environment. Quite a lot of people turn up to work one day and are effectively told, what you were hired for has changed. We hired you as an individual specialist, and we hired you with a manager who's ultimately responsible for your performance and will direct you and guide you. And now, without renegotiating your contract or your terms of employment, because we've decided on a different strategy, your role has changed. And regardless of how much benefit this change has for that person, the fact that it's effectively imposed upon somebody increases the chances of resistance, disenfranchisement, and disengagement. So it's a question or a discussion that often doesn't happen, and I think organisations are missing a huge part there of disengaging some potentially amazing advocates of an agile approach simply by saying, this is what you are now going to do.
So I look forward to reading more about this in Collaboration Mastery. I think that's due out in like 2018, right?
Steady on.
No, I only teasing you, but it's fascinating stuff for the listeners out there. Check out his 3 books. I'll get links to Scrum Mastery, Product Mastery, and the Coach's Casebook into the show notes. I think they are all essential reading if you're a part of a Scrum team, regardless of role. If anything, if you're a Scrum Master, it will give you empathy for the product owner. If you're a product owner, it'll give you empathy for the Scrum Master. If you're a developer, well, it'll give you insights into why the Scrum Master coaches in a certain way, why the product owner asks for certain things. And I think that understanding and awareness that's created, especially by these 3 books, can only lead to richer collaboration. So we get links to those books in the show notes. Geoff, I've truly enjoyed this conversation. Really excited to hear that some ideas are brewing, no commitments, but perhaps some new things in the future. We'll get the pubcast out in front of the listeners as well. It's another great Agile podcast that there's not enough. So certainly glad to hear that you guys are doing that. But at this point, the floor is yours. Is there anything else you'd like to get in front of the listeners? Anything that you'd like to promote? Any conferences coming up? Anything that you feel they should know about? And if there's a way that they can reach out either through Twitter or some other means if they have any questions or want to continue the conversation.
Cool. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's been a blast. The time has flown by, which is usually a good sign.
Right. Right.
In terms of, not really anything to promote, but one thing that constantly surprises a lot of people that I speak to, they see me as a trainer, they see me as an author and things like that. But when I mentioned that a lot of my time is spent coaching product owners one-to-one, it's often met with a lot of surprise. But a lot of the product owners that I work with, having that opportunity to have some guided one-to-one reflection, to work through a particular scenario and analyze what happened, why it happened, what's going on for them there, what's going on for others there, in a safe, neutral environment, because I have no political machinations or motives behind my engagement other than to help them achieve what they want to achieve as a coach. Is met with, as I say, it's met with a lot of surprise, but a lot more product owners are aware of it's not just a technical thing, it's not just a business thing or a strategic thing, it's a psychological thing, it's a thinking thing, it's a being thing. And so I guess I'd ask all product owners out there who are listening to just consider the idea of seeing if there's anybody out there who might be a useful, neutral, challenging sounding board as a coach.
Very good. Well, Geoff, thank you again for being on the show. We'll get links out to all the great resources we've talked about today. And again, just appreciative of all the things you've done to bring awareness to the very difficult roles that we play as we're playing the game of Scrum. And so great stuff there, and just really appreciate it.
No, good, and appreciation to you as well. This podcast is a labor of love, and you're doing a great service to the community as well, Ryan. So
great, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. And to the listeners, thank you for being here. Definitely have seen another uptick. We've had another record-setting month in downloads and listens, getting a lot of great feedback on Twitter. So to the listener out there, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. You're sharing the show, and that is the single best way to support it. So thank you for those efforts and questions and comments, and please keep them coming. I really love seeing reactions to the show, and when we get great people like Geoff on, I know it generates a lot of comments and questions, and it's always great to see. So thank you for that. And to everyone out there, thank you again for listening. Thanks for being there, and have a great night.
Thanks for listening to Agile for Humans. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop us a question on Twitter @AgileForHumans or visit agileforhumans.com.